I came home one Thursday. Late spring, the kind of day where the air still bites but the grass smells sweet and alive, and heard the low growl of machinery echoing through the trees. At first, I thought it was road work. We get utility crews out here in Oakhaven Heights patching cable, trimming branches, the usual noise pollution. But this was different. I drove up the long, narrow plot of land behind my house. The property I inherited from my grandfather, the plot that sits just above the Whispering Pines development. The one that never got swallowed by the HOA. And there it was. 2 yellow bulldozers chewing through the back slope. Freshly turned soil scattered everywhere. Orange construction flags fluttering like they owned the place. And then I saw the sign. Laminated plastic, staked deep into the ground. HOA Improvement Project. Retention Basin Construction Zone. I stopped breathing for a second. Just stared. It wasn't the first time the HOA had been a pain. They'd hit me with fines for mailbox height, complaints about my storm door color, even a threatening letter over the flagpole I put up on Memorial Day. But this wasn't annoyance. This was violation. This was destruction. I parked my truck and stepped out slowly. Someone had driven a backhoe straight through a patch of my wife's lilies, the ones she planted before the chemo got too rough. That's when the shaking started. Not from fear, but from a cold, slow-burning fury that used to get me through deployments. 2 guys in hard hats stood near the machines. One noticed me. "You can't be here, sir. Active work site." I let out a dry laugh. "That's funny. I live here. This is my land." He shifted. "Uncomfortable. Sir, we're under direction of the HOA board. Flood mitigation plan. We have permits on file." "Show me," I said. He hesitated. "I don't have them on me. You'll need to take it up with the HOA." "Oh, I bet I will," I muttered, turning back to the truck. I slammed the door and drove straight back to the house. My hands white-knuckled on the wheel. They had no idea who they'd just crossed. I spent 24 years as a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers officer. I built bridges in Afghanistan. I know terrain. I know blueprints. And I sure as hell know bureaucracy. That night, the bourbon was cold and the property deeds were stacked high. I traced the contour lines on my land survey. The retention dam they were building? 100% on my land. Not an inch on common HOA space. I looked at the slope. I'd measured rainfall here 100 times. I knew the ground was unstable, sandy. Poor load-bearing capacity. Whoever approved this wasn't just illegal. They were dangerously incompetent. At 2 a.m., I called my old friend, Ben, who worked for the county water office. He listened, groggy and silent, then whistled. "Jesus, Ethan, no grading permit? No notice? They're violating at least 3 municipal codes. You need a lawyer. Like, yesterday." "Already on it, Ben, but tell me something, structurally. Based on the location. How screwed are they if we get a heavy fall storm?" Ben didn't hesitate. "If that thing holds more than 2 inches of rain on that soil base, the whole lower development is going to get a very unwelcome visit." The first confrontation. A lesson in arrogance. The next morning, I walked into the HOA office. Glass doors, fake stone facade, the usual suburban veneer. 5 minutes later, Bartholomew, Bart, Thorne, the HOA president, appeared. Khakis, a pastel golf shirt, a clipboard tucked under his arm, looking like he was leading a sales seminar. Not an illicit demolition project. He looked at me like a leaking pipe. Inconvenient, but not dangerous. "Mr. Stone, what can I do for you?" he said smoothly. "You can explain why there's a damn construction crew on my property." He smiled, wide and patronizing. "It's the new flood mitigation plan. Ethan, emergency authorization. Your parcel falls within the natural runoff basin. We reviewed the easement filings and determined it qualifies for community improvement." I stepped closer. My voice dropped, heavy and controlled. "There is no easement. You didn't ask. You just bulldozed it." He shrugged. "An infuriating, casual movement. We have counsel advising us. We're within our rights. And frankly, you're the only one holding up progress. We're doing this for the safety of the neighborhood." I snapped. The engineer, the soldier, broke through the calm homeowner. "Don't feed me that bureaucratic garbage. You're building a dam on unstable soil. Without permits, without engineering review. If that thing fails, the whole lower slope floods. You are putting people in danger." He raised an eyebrow. That smug look plastered on his face. "Are you threatening the board, Mr. Stone?" "No," I replied. "I'm warning the board." I walked out without another word. I knew my decision had been made. I wasn't just going to fight them. I was going to dismantle them. I spent the weekend doing what I do best, pulling records, piecing together the timeline, and building my case brick by brick. By Monday, I had the full chain of title, explicitly stating no conveyance of access rights granted. The HOA had zero claim. They were liars. My lawyer, Viv Chase, looked like she'd eaten tougher HOAs for breakfast. Navy slacks, no-nonsense glasses, and a battered leather briefcase that looked like it had seen more trenches than I had. They trespassed, constructed without permission, didn't pull a permit, and compromised the slope's integrity. She said, tapping the documents, "This is criminal negligence if someone gets hurt. Can you stop them? We file a cease and desist this afternoon. Injunction request for emergency hearing goes out tomorrow. We'll serve it right to their little board meeting." She smiled, and there was pure, cold steel in it. They think they're untouchable. They're about to be introduced to reality. The community fractures. By Wednesday, the papers were served. That evening, I went to the HOA board meeting just to watch. The room was full of residents, chattering over cheap coffee and lemon bars. Bart Thorne launched into his usual speech about modernizing infrastructure and keeping premiums low. That's when Viv walked in. Calm, confident, and utterly devastating. She walked straight up to Bart and handed him a manila envelope, speaking loud enough for the back row to hear. "You've been served, Mr. Thorne." The room went dead silent. Bart scanned the papers and flushed a mottled pink. "This is absurd. We acted within our rights." "No, you acted outside of the law," Viv replied, her voice firm. "You are on private land. You knew it, and you continued building anyway." Bart tried to argue, but the residents were already murmuring. A woman near the front, Sarah, a single mom from 2 blocks down, raised her hand, pointing at me. "You mean that construction site is on his property?" Viv turned to her. "Yes, ma'am. The HOA knowingly built a structure on Mr. Stone's private land without permits or consent." The room boiled over. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I let Viv's briefcase and the threat of case law do the talking. But as I left that night, the victory felt hollow. The construction had stopped, but the half-finished, poorly engineered dam was still there, holding back thousands of gallons of water. And no one, especially Bart Thorne, had the slightest idea how unstable it really was. The next time I saw Bart, the smug arrogance was cracking like the very dam he'd authorized. He tried to hide behind a statement about unfortunate legal confusion at the community center meeting. But I cut him off. Setting: a poorly lit, packed community center, folding chairs. Bart Thorne is sweating at a podium. Ethan stands up in the back row. Bart Thorne, tense, defensive. Our engineers believed the lower slope was within community jurisdiction. That was our understanding when we broke ground. Ethan Stone, projecting. Clear, absolute, there's no confusion. Bart, you knew exactly what you were doing. A hush falls over the crowd. Bart turns, his eyes tight with contained fury. Bart Thorne, "Mr. Stone, if you have something to." Ethan. It began with a silence, the kind of unnatural stillness that creeps under your skin like cold breath on the back of your neck. Bandit stood at the glass door, ears perked, body tense. And then the sky cracked. At exactly 9:42 p.m., the thunder hit, but it was deeper, closer, personal. The first drops hit the roof like coins. Then came the sheets, 2 inches an hour. The wind howled through the trees, bending them like they knew something we didn't. I grabbed my headlamp and ran toward the ridge. Live footage from a news chopper was already hitting my phone. The top of the retention dam was slick with white water, curling and crashing over the top lip. The reporter's voice was trembling. "We're seeing what appears to be structural buckling near the center portion of the wall." No, not buckling, collapse. I reached the edge of my southern slope, boots sinking into the mud. The wall was bowed outward like the belly of a beast about to burst. The sinkhole had swallowed the base, undermining the foundation with a sickening, methodical elegance. And then I heard it. A low, deep rumble, A guttural groan from beneath the earth itself. The entire slope shuddered. The wall cracked down the middle. And then it happened. The dam exploded. It wasn't a fireball. It was water, earth, and violence unbound. Tens of thousands of gallons surged forward in a violent, deafening roar. Chunks of concrete the size of filing cabinets were flung through the air. Mud and debris surged down the slope like an unbound freight train. Trees snapped in half. Streetlights flickered and died. I stood frozen for a second, watching a disaster that shouldn't exist outside of documentaries. Then I turned and ran, not away from the flood, but toward the street where I knew people might still be evacuating too slowly. The water reached the first homes in under 3 minutes. Sarah's house was the first I saw hit. Her SUV was parked halfway out of the garage. The water slammed into it like a wrecking ball, lifting the entire vehicle and turning it sideways. Sarah was frozen on the porch, 2 small kids clinging to her. "Get inside," I shouted, running full tilt. "Upstairs, now." "We don't have stairs," she yelled back, her eyes wide with panic. "Countertops, high ground, now." I grabbed her boys by the hands and dragged them inside. We scrambled onto the kitchen island just as muddy water surged through the front door, lifting rugs, furniture, and photographs off the walls in seconds. The sound was deafening, like standing in the ocean during a storm. Trapped inside 4 walls. Outside, chaos reigned. The WA clubhouse, Bart Thorne's precious stone facade, was struck head-on. Its foundation gave in seconds. The entire thing crumbled like a sandcastle kicked over by a careless god. I stayed with Sarah and her kids until the emergency responders reached the house by inflatable raft. They pulled us out through a back window. Bandit was soaked but alive, clinging to my leg like a shadow. By the time we reached the emergency shelter, the damage registered: 37 homes flooded, 9 completely destroyed. No fatalities, but only because of the warnings, because of the footage. Because FEMA had begun evacuations just hours earlier. The fall of the empire. At first light, the devastation looked like a war zone. This wasn't an act of God, this was man-made. A disaster with signatures and names attached. I stood outside the yellow FEMA tape. The street where Bart Thorne used to live was now a trench. FEMA's regional director, a no-nonsense hydrologist named Remy, stood at the broken dam, shaking his head. "This thing wasn't built to any standard I've ever seen," he muttered. "It wasn't," I confirmed. "No geo-exile, no reinforced footings, practically decorative rebar." Remy looked out over the wreckage. "Somebody needs to go to jail for this." Later that day, at the community briefing, the FEMA official didn't flinch. As of 4:30 this afternoon, the WA is under federal investigation for misappropriation of funds, failure to obtain permits, and multiple violations of environmental law. Board operations are frozen until further notice. The room, the people who had once ignored me, gasped and then slowly, silently, began to clap. Sarah was there. Mrs. Gable was safe. Bart Thorne resigned under pressure before Monday. Brent, the treasurer, was arrested 2 weeks later. Wire fraud, misuse of WA funds, possible RICO implications still pending. They thought they could hide behind paper shields. They didn't understand. The flood didn't just wash away their dam. It washed away their excuses. The verdict and the stone clause. The courthouse was quiet, but the emotion inside was explosive. 3 weeks after the dam burst, the civil suit was officially filed. Stone vs. Forest Glen Homeowners Association. I wasn't alone. More than a dozen families joined as co-plaintiffs. Bart Thorne sat beside his new defense team, looking like a man trying to hold back a flood with a paper cup. The smugness was completely gone, replaced by a hollow fear. Viv opened with a statement that silenced the room. "Your Honor, this is not a story about weather. This is a story about power taken, misused, and abused by a board that believed rules were for other people. The consequences were not theoretical, they were real. They were devastating, and they were preventable." The defense tried to blame the contractor, claimed unfortunate misjudgments, but every time they spoke, we had a counter-punch. Emails showing Bart signed off on the project knowing about the permit issues.